Thanks again to this week's sponsors. All right, back to the podcast. It's time to spill some tea. Let's start by talking about millennialism.
Isn't it true that you incorrectly predicted the second coming of Christ on multiple occasions?
Well, I may have made a few incorrect calculations, but I assure you, he will come.
175 years later is quite the miscalculation.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. I thought I was the second coming of Jesus because of the vision I had while in jail.
Anyway, I should probably educate you all, so I will. While I was on my journey to discovering the actual date of the second coming, I found that it had already happened, and the second coming had taken place in 70 AD, and therefore mankind is already living in the New Age. But I'm sure you already knew that.
Oh, really, brother? I agree with some of your other values, but I must disagree with you on this. I should let you know that the second coming has yet to happen. Why do you think I worked so hard to promote the temperance movement and abolitionism? You think that the millennial is supposed to be filled with hatred and drugs? I think not. The world is so polluted with wrong that Jesus Christ would not even consider stepping foot on planet Earth.
Well, brother, as you know, I was the founder of the Oneida community, which was the most successful utopian socialist communities in America. And I do agree with how the world is sinful now, but Christ came to earth in 70 AD, which was a time without sin.
Well, I don't know when the second coming will be, but it is definitely in the future. God told me so himself, and he said it's coming sometime soon. That's why he has told this church to gather and form Zion, a community of righteousness.
What do you all believe surrounding the millennium? For example, the Millerites believe that after you die, you live in an intermediate state until the second coming happens, and then we believe in conditional immortality, which will allow a chosen few to be resurrected as immortal beings. Alright, let's move on to gender roles, shall we? How about we start with Mother Ann Lee, a female preacher of this time? What say you?
We Shakers believed in gender equality. There was no absurd patriarchy. Men and women held the same jobs and had access to the same opportunities. We also refrained from marriage. Instead of men forcing women to marry them without their consent, nobody got married, and this sure helped with our aspect of celibacy.
I agree with your views about gender equality, Mother Ann. While I didn't preach about allowing women equal opportunity, I allowed both of my wives, God bless their souls, to participate in my revival meetings and campaigns. Some say that I aided in changing the roles of women in the Jacksonian era. But Mother Ann, I question some of your other ideas. Isn't your value of celibacy what led to the downfall of your sect? You had to snatch orphans in order to keep it alive, and even then it didn't work.
Yes, it was. But I wouldn't see our value of adopting as snatching orphans. I would see it as providing them with a better life in order to get closer to God. An aspect of the adoption was teaching them Shaker values. When the number of orphans began to get lower, we didn't want to sin and have sexual relations in order to keep our society going, so we let it fall apart.
Joseph Smith, isn't it true that you had 40 polygamous wives?
How dare you accuse me of such things? I would never practice polygamy. Polygamy is horrid and evil and terrible. I just practice plural marriage. It is good and righteous and commanded by God. I would never even do this if he hadn't forced me. And I don't have 40 plural wives.
John Humphrey Noyes, what about you and your idea of complex marriage?
Like I mentioned before, I coined complex marriage. If you're not sure what that is, allow me to clarify. In the Oneida community, we focused on our relationship with God, and second, we focused on sexual morality. I believe that masturbation, or any man sowing seeds he doesn't intend to grow, is not right. But I understand that young people would face sexual starvation, so I came up with a solution, which was that they were to practice on women who had already gone through menopause until they were able to control themselves.
Mr. Smith, isn't it also true that you made many people angry because of your new ideologies? And that you were even killed by an angry mob?
Well, technically yes, but that doesn't mean I'm not right. I, as the mayor of Nauvoo, had to protect my people from the harmful information being spread by the Nauvoo Expositor, a newspaper in the area. Because of this threat, the printing press was destroyed. I was charged with riot and then treason, and while I was awaiting trial in Carthage jail, I was attacked by an angry mob. My brother Hiram Smith and my friends John Taylor and Willard Richards were imprisoned with me. Our jailer had kindly allowed us out of our jail cell that night, and we were in the second-floor bedroom. As we heard the mob storm up the stairs, we were fearful. We tried our best to hold the door closed against them, but one of their bullets went straight through the door and hit my brother in the head. He died instantly. I then rushed to the window to escape. As I stood in the window, I was shot twice from behind and twice from members of the mob who were still outside. As I fell, I yelled out, "Oh Lord, my God!" and died soon after landing on the ground far below. So yes, I did make people angry, and I was killed by a mob.
Mr. Noyes, is it true that you were a follower of Mr. Finney? And that you even went so far as to call each other brother?
Indeed, but it is what Christians refer to each other as, because we like to welcome one another with love and warmth. But I do have to admit, I found it quite doubtful that he would even agree to discuss our beliefs, given the rumors and speculation in my philosophy. But when Mr. Finney had told me he was privileged to be in the presence of my views, I lost all apprehension. After meeting Mr. Finney, I was shocked by his warmth and kindness and found it quite beautiful. His candor gave me hope not just for our friendship, but the entirety of the Christian church.
Wow, thank you, brother. But why didn't you share my beliefs about postmillennialism?
Well, clearly you weren't much of a friend if you didn't even share any of the same ideologies.
Now, it is true that I was inspired by Mr. Finney's work, and he was one of the reasons I decided to become a minister. But diving further into my research, I was able to strengthen my beliefs of perfectionism, and I also discovered other theology that I identified with. Being a friend and a familiar with one another does not mean I am not allowed to have different opinions and different ideologies. Mr. Finney and I were both quite content about our ideologies and still grew fond of each other. And to answer Brother Finney's question, I did my research, and that is the conclusion I came to believe.
What about social reform? What types did your various ideologies promote?
Well, while I allowed women opportunities to work in my revivals, I more overtly promoted abolitionism. The college I worked at, Oberlin, was not only a stop for people in the Underground Railroad, but it was also, for the most part, desegregated. I also supported the temperance movement. But let's not allow my reform movements to overshadow my focus on revivalism.
I know that Mr. Noyes brought this up earlier, but did any of you start utopian societies or communities?
I did. I found it easier to live this lifestyle in isolation because there were a lot of what modern day folk would call haters against Shakerism. We settled in New York and Ohio.
Miss Lee, what is with all the dancing in your religious ceremonies?
During our religious ceremonies, we have no limitations to how we worship. All of the shaking is to show that we really believe in the first Christ and to acknowledge his presence with us. It goes a little something like this.
As longtime listeners will know, we have a tradition for new guests to rant about things on their mind. Would anyone like to participate?
Oh, I would love to begin. First, I hope you are all supporters of abolitionism. I mean, how can we achieve true redemption if we suppress others? I even helped enslaved people escape. The college I worked at, Oberlin, was a stop on the Underground Railroad. Additionally, I would like to challenge people to face their own sins. If you have sinned, view redemption as something you will do and will achieve. I do not support the idea of cannot, which is simply another term for will not. And for you ministers out there, compel your audience and potential converts. Use your words and your sermons to your advantage. They should not leave without feeling the warmth and waves of liquid love that God can offer. I hope you all take my advice to heart.
As much as I love a good rant, I must be getting back now.
And that's the tea. But before we end this podcast, I would like to give a special thanks to our sponsor, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is always there listening to our Christian prayers. This has been Tea Time with me, your host, William Miller. Thanks once again to our lovely guests. Tune in next week for the man, the myth Confucius, who will be talking about one of the first religions, Confucianism.